there was absolutely no dissent or tension at all between the unions. We agreed that if this was going to help the working class overall and bring in a lot more a greater voice on the job for so many workers in Virginia, then we were all going to be for it and we were going to support it. If, however, as it turned out, that this was going to be crappy jobs without unions and no union rights, no worker rights, we were all going to be against it. So I was very proud of the fact that the entire labor movement met weekly, stuck together, and even though these stakeholders, the developers, would have loved to divide labor and try to find a way to pit one group against another, that never happened for 1 second.
Hello, powerful people, and welcome back to the Power at Work blog. My name is Seth Harris, and I am a senior fellow at the Burns Center for Social Change. I want to thank you for joining this blogcast. It's a blogcast about how the labor movement succeeded in stopping a billionaire owner of 2 sports teams and a bunch of other stuff from relocating those teams from the city to the suburbs in the Washington area, and in the process stood up for good union jobs and workers in Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. It's a great story, and we're going to hear about it from leaders of the labor movement in Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C., who were in the middle of the fight. And they're going to tell you about how they produced a strategy that yielded an important victory for labor. You'll also hear about how unions can use collaboration and solidarity to affect government and business decision-making, which, after all, is why you build worker power, is to change the minds, or at least change the decisions of employers and government. And they were up against some very powerful, very rich folks, and they won. So this is sort of a blogcast about how to beat a billionaire. But before we get to our conversation, I want you to know that the Power at Work blog is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. The Labor Radio Podcast Network brings together over 100 labor radio shows and podcasts. To learn more about the network or to find other fantastic content, labor radio shows, labor podcasts, go to www.laborradionetwork.org. And if you want to listen to or download any or all of the Power at Work blogcasts in podcast form, in audio podcast form, they're available for streaming and download on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and on Overcast. Just search Power at Work, essentially on any commercial podcast platform, and you will find us there. And while you're there, how about if you give us a 5-star rating? That will help other people to find our content. They will thank you, and we will thank you as well. So today we're talking to labor leaders from some of the most influential labor groups in Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about a secretive plan that was hatched by right-wing Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin and billionaire sports team owner Ted Leonsis. The plan was to move the Capitals, which is Washington's hockey team, and the Wizards, which is the Washington basketball team, from the Capital One Arena, which is in downtown Washington, D.C., to a brand new, as yet unbuilt arena in Alexandria, Virginia. Alexandria is a city of its own, but it's a much smaller city. It's really a suburb of Washington, D.C. And you'll hear about how these labor leaders and others like them tried unsuccessfully to work with Leonsis and Youngkin to benefit workers. You'll hear about the solidarity and support that labor received after the move was announced from other labor groups in the Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. area. And you'll also hear about how they worked with Democrats in the state legislature and also in the Alexandria City Council to address these issues. It's a great story. It's a model story. There are some difficult choices that these folks needed to make. And they tell you about how they made those choices. And you'll hear a little bit of disagreement between the folks you'll hear from in this blogcast. You're going to hear from Virginia Diamond, who's the president of the Northern Virginia AFL-CIO. We'll be joined by Samuel Epps, who's the president of the Metro Washington Council AFL-CIO. That's Washington, D.C.'s Central Labor Council. You'll also hear from Greg Akerman, who's the president of the Baltimore, D.C. Metro Building Trades Council. So we'll get to that conversation in a minute. I just want to, an aside, if you don't mind, I'm recording this on May 2nd, Thursday, May 2nd. Last night, I had the privilege on behalf of Power at Work of co-presenting a movie at the DC Labor Film Fest. The DC Labor Film Fest is run by a phenomenal man, a wonderful man named Chris Garlock, who's from the Labor Heritage Foundation. He has a terrific podcast called Labor Heritage. He actually has multiple podcasts. Labor Heritage is his main outlet. And he's been around for a long time. This DC Labor Film Fest has been around for more than 25 years. It's terrific. It was a privilege to be able to participate. So I wanted to thank Chris for the opportunity. We presented a wonderful movie on the opening night of the Film Fest. May 1st was the opening night of the Film Fest. A wonderful new Ken Loach movie called The Old Oak, which is about sort of the aftermath of the closing of mines and the defeat of miners' strikes in England, in a small town in northern England, and the conflict between some very, very angry white working class families and some Syrian refugee families that are brought into the town to find refuge from the horrible civil war in Syria. It's very moving. It's quite powerful. It's a little didactic in places, a little bit talky in places, a little too much explaining and a little less showing, but beautifully acted, very simply acted, very much in the Ken Loach style. These are the kinds of films that he makes, and they're absolutely wonderful. We did not have it on the list of labor films that we included in our Labor Oscars events earlier this year before the Academy Awards were held. It will definitely be on our labor films list for next year, as will almost all of the films that are in the DC Labor Film Fest. So if you're interested in if you're in the DC area, and you're interested in the DC Labor Film Fest, we have a post on the blog that talks all about it, provides you with the links. It runs throughout May, which is Labor History Month. I really encourage you to go and support it. It's in the beautiful AFI Silver Theater in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's fantastic, and Chris just does a wonderful job. So go out and support the DC Labor Film Fest. All right, so Virginia Diamond, Samuel Epps, Greg Akerman, those are our guests. You are our audience. Here's the conversation. So let me start by thanking all of you for being here. So grateful. This is such a great story of the labor movement, fighting the fight, taking on a billionaire and winning. And so we really wanted to tell the story. So grateful to have you here to help us to tell the story. I want to give the audience a little bit of background because not everybody is lucky enough to live in the Northern Virginia, Greater Washington, D.C. area. And so if they're not regular readers of the Amazon Washington Post, they may not know this story. So I want to give them a little bit of background. And it's a story about Potomac Yards. So Potomac Yards was going to be a gigantic $2 billion, 70-acre sports, entertainment, and retail complex in Alexandria, Virginia, which is just outside Washington, D.C. The Capitals and the Wizards were supposed to play their games in Potomac Yards beginning in 2028. They were going to abandon the downtown D.C. arena that was built for them and in which they currently play. And the deal to build Potomac Yards was announced by Governor Glenn Youngkin, a right-wing Republican governor in Virginia, and Ted Leonsis, who is the billionaire owner of a company called Monumental, which is something you would see maybe in a Mel Brooks movie. But he's the owner of Monumental Sports and Entertainment, which is the entity that owns the Capitals and the Wizards. And they announced this plan to build Potomac Yards in December 2023. And enter our three guests today. So we're going to hear about what happened next in some detail. But I first have to ask this question, a very important question. Are any or all of you fans of either the Wizards or the Capitals or both? Greg, are you a fan of the sports teams that Mr. Leonsis owns?
I think I don't really follow the sports teams as much, but so no, I can't say I am.
What about you, Sam? Big sports fan?
I'm a sports fan. I grew up a Lakers fan. I'm a Magic Johnson guy, and
All
so
right.
the Lakers
All right.
Lakers are my team. But when you're in Rome in DC, you always root for the home team. So it's a basketball town, and I like to go down there and see games when other teams come in that I like.
Yeah, I go down there to see games too, but I'm not rooting for the Wizards. I'm rooting for my hometown New York Knicks. But what about you, Virginia? Caps fan? Wizards fan?
Go Caps, go Wizards.
Yeah. Our viewers may not know that the Caps have been really good for a really long time. The Wizards have been horrible for a really since John Wall hurt his ankle. But this is not a sports blogcast. This is a labor blogcast. So let's turn that. So, Greg, you're sitting in your office or sitting at home. The deal is announced by the governor and Ted Leonsis. What was your reaction when you heard about the deal? Or was that the first time you heard about the deal? Had you heard about it before that?
We had kind of heard murmurs, right? I mean, this was first kind of discussed as a concept, I think, openly around the summer. But once we had heard legislators getting brought in for secret economic development meetings about something big maybe happening in Alexandria, that's when we started to kind of maybe put two and two together. I think honestly, our first reaction was that this was the potential to be something kind of cool. I mean, labor and industry have a history of working together to achieve a lot of exciting economic development proposals, including for sports deals exactly like this. And so, we at the very outset said, great, let's try and figure out if this is an opportunity that, we could work with, both the Commonwealth, with the private developers that are associated with this project, and make something happen. And I will say, my first call, in addition to talking to several affiliates about it, my first call was to Sam, and to the folks at Unite Here, because we initially said, look, before we even sit down with the owners or with anybody else, we've got to go at this together. So we knew that this could be exciting for all of us, and we knew, I think, from the very outset, working with Virginia Diamond too at the Labor Council, that this is something we had to do together.
Well, so Sam, let's pick up the story there. So you're probably hearing a lot of the same murmurs about the possibility of the deal. What was the chatter in Unite Here, and what was the chatter in the Metropolitan Washington Labor Council around the prospects for this deal?
Yeah, we heard as well as hearing from Greg. Many of in the Metropolitan Washington Council affiliates, are inside Cap One Arena doing ticketing, as well as 32BJ, who does janitorial services there as well too. Unite Here Local 23, who does concessions there. So there was murmurs when this went on there as well too. And I think what it was for both our council and also looking forward, as Greg talked about, this opportunity here is, one, is to protect the workers who were there if it would eventually be built in Alexandria, and then two, the opportunity to be able to grow. Local 25, who represents hotel workers, as part of this deal was one or two hotels being built there, and I certainly that was our conversation of opportunity to continue with the affiliates who were there, and then to grow and expand with opportunities there, and work with the trades who was going to build out this whole project here. And so I think we were cautiously optimistic, and Jenny did a great job bringing both affiliates who were inside, but also those potential growth ones, from STAG after to the Players Association with Marty Walsh. But Jenny did a great job of bringing us all together to talk about that. But it certainly started with Greg and I, with the building trades and Unite Here.
So, Virginia, let me bring you into the conversation and ask you about that same moment in time when you're first hearing about the deal, the conversations are just starting. Did you begin to plan immediately? And what was the goal of the plan? Was the goal, we're going to stop it sounds like what we're hearing from Greg and Sam is the first goal was not let's kill this thing. The first goal was, well, let's see whether we can play a role here. Maybe there's an opportunity to organize. So what was the plan, or what was your thinking around the plan? And most importantly, what was the goal that you thought you were going to try to accomplish?
So the mission of the Northern Virginia Labor Federation is to provide opportunities for working class people in Northern Virginia to organize in unions and to lift up their living standards, to gain a voice on the job, gain power. So when we first heard about this potential huge development, the immediate question is this going to be an opportunity for us to give working class people to the chance to have unions? Is this going to be a chance to have good union jobs here? And they were talking about 30,000 jobs, and so a variety of jobs, both in the with the arena complex, but a convention center, hotels, retail, restaurants, all kinds of potential jobs. And so our immediate goal was to come up with a plan where, if this were to be approved, that those people would have, all those workers would have the right to organize, whether it's through labor peace or through project labor agreements, that these would be good union jobs, because that could have been transformational for us here in Northern Virginia, where we have a union density of less than 4%, and where people are really, really struggling. So that was our thought was, we're going to come together and we're going to see whether this is a chance to achieve economic and racial advances in our area.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight your point about union density in Virginia. Even though people tend to think of Virginia as being sort of akin to a northern state, ironically, because it was the headquarters, the capital of the Confederacy, it's still a right to work state, right? There's still a right to work law in the books in Virginia. It's very difficult to manage unions, run unions, organize unions in Virginia. And there's still a lot of cultural hostility to unions in Virginia, although you all are working your hearts out to turn that around. I want to make as clear as we can what the effect of this move would have been for workers in the area. And I'm an old guy, so I can actually remember the history of the Capital One arena that Sam mentioned, which is the arena that the Capitals and the Wizards currently play in. So Abe Pollin, who at that time was the owner of the Capitals and the Wizards, moved them from an arena that was out in suburban Prince George's County to an arena that he paid to build in downtown DC. And the way he described it, and I think this actually proved to be true, was the goal was to spark more economic development in center Washington, D.C., at least in Northwest Washington, D.C., in the business district of D.C. And he did that in 1997. The arena opened, I think, in 1997, 1998. And it actually played out exactly as Mr. Pollin said it was going to play out. There was immense economic development. There's theaters and restaurants and all kinds of cultural activities and other things that are going on in D.C. that had not been going on before the arena moved downtown. So it was a meaningful contributor to economic development in downtown DC. But Sam, you mentioned some of the folks who work in the Capital One arena who are unionized, which is very, very good news. What would moving the Wizards and the Caps out of the Capital One arena have meant for those workers? And what would it have meant for the workers in the surrounding area, the rest of downtown DC? Because there's a lot of, you mentioned SEIU 32BJ who do building cleaning. There's lots and lots of buildings operating. There's lots and lots of restaurant workers. My guess is most of them not organized. But so what would it have meant if the teams had moved out to Virginia for the folks in the district?
First of all, it would have meant for those inside longer commutes. right? And if they were on transportation, they would have had to, and if they were commuting in from suburban Prince George's, Montgomery County, or even in Virginia, some in Virginia, they would have had a longer commute, transportation difficulties, and so they would just have longer commutes. The second thing
that's assuming that they would have gotten. So, do you think those workers would have gotten the jobs in the new arena?
Well, that's what we were working on, and this is, as you described, a powerful solidarity moment of organizing. We were working to get what we call those who are currently under contract to also have sort of that additional successorship clause to go ahead and be able to organize and have the unit that they would. What that would have meant, though, as you just mentioned, right to work, if, Local 23 represented 500 members there, since it went to right to work, they only could have still representing everybody, but 250 union members,
right,
because everyone does not have to join the union. So when someone asks, were we exploring this as a deal? Absolutely, because we saw, as what Jenny said, the potential of organizing a large platform of folks in one area. So we were certainly willing and able to discuss that. Two, what moving that entity out of Washington D.C., it would have hurt the transportation workers who drive right into Growley Place, that bring many of workers in service industry, the hotel industry around there. It wouldn't have drove any individuals into downtown to stay, and those nights would have probably dropped, and workers would have had an ancillary effect on that as well too. And also to restaurants, we represent some high-end restaurants at Local 25, and it would bring less people into the center core of downtown, and really just really had a long-term and ripple effect on a lot of our affiliates in the downtown core.
Yeah, and Jenny, I wanted to ask you about that. So one of the problems with these moves is you're sort of potentially pitting groups of workers and certainly jurisdictions against one another. And and one of the things that you worry about when businesses move from the District of Columbia to Virginia or from New York to Georgia is that you're going to lose a lot of union members. You're at real risk of losing a lot of union members. It's not just that that it's hard to organize, it's that it's hard to keep folks in the union when you have a right to work law. So how did you engage with the folks in Washington to sort of keep the labor movement together, united in solidarity around this move without and avoid having groups of workers pitted against one another?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, because I think this was an excellent example of 100% solidarity among all of the unions, all of the workers. And we had more than 20 different unions that came together. We met weekly. It was both the unions that are currently within Monumental, the concession workers, the stagehands, the box office people, the hockey players, the janitors, etc., as well as the unions that would have been, expanding and representing workers in Alexandria if it moved. We were 100% united, and we all took the position, and we sent a letter to the legislature in Virginia saying that we will support this move if it brings good jobs to all of the workers, the building trades, to the concession workers, all of the people who, as Sam says, would have been moving. They would have been relocating, but they will still have their same unionization status, moving over from Monumental, but also adding in hotel workers. There are no union hotels in Alexandria currently. So we wanted to get union hotels. We wanted to get the convention center, the parking garage, all of the construction of the entire entertainment district. It would have meant so much to thousands and thousands of workers. So there was absolutely no dissent or tension at all between the unions. we agreed that if this was going to help the working class overall and bring in a lot more a greater voice on the job for so many workers in Virginia, then we were all going to be for it and we were going to support it. If, however, as it turned out, that this was going to be crappy jobs without unions and no union rights, no worker rights, we were all going to be against it. So I was very proud of the fact that the entire labor movement met weekly, stuck together. And even though, these stakeholders, the developers would have loved to divide labor and try to find a way to pit one group against another, that never happened for 1 second.
Yeah, I want Seth.
Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I want to follow up on that, and that division usually happens because Greg, with the NLRB laws, he can negotiate his wages, his benefits while he's doing it. That's what a project labor agreement does. On the operational side, for those of us in the private sector, we can't do that. Labor law doesn't allow us to do that. And so we have to work towards what we call a labor peace agreement. And that just allows a process of unionization there. And that's what they usually say. Well, the trades, we already took, the trades took care. So I'm really, grateful for both Jenny and Greg for saying, no, it's everyone or none of us at all as well too. And I think that's what, the first call Greg made to me and us is to really understand that. And we have a great working relationship on that, because that happens, pitting jurisdiction and labor union and different sectors against each other a lot.
Yeah, I love that part of the story. I also love what you were talking about, Virginia, the idea of using economic development as a lever to organize more workers, not merely the workers directly involved in the project, but the workers nearby. Greg, you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate it. I think just to expand on the point a little bit.
I got a question for you then.
No, yeah. I think I just to say, I think one of the lessons we learned was that kind of dividing the unions was the first tactic that the kind of the developers tried. It wasn't like an ancillary tactic. It was the number one thing that they tried. And it frankly, when that fell flat, they didn't really have any other options. And so I think part of why we stuck together is frankly, I think there's a generation of folks in the labor movement who have seen how it doesn't work when, one union takes a deal here and another union takes a deal over here. And we kind of leave everybody behind. We don't really want to get down that slippery slope. And so, it was a heartening exercise that, we just had a lot of labor leaders in the room who really wanted to stick together, not just for this project, but for future projects, and saw kind of the benefit in being able to do that.
Yeah, you got to believe that every developer is looking at this and saying, oh no, we got a problem here. Okay, Greg, I want you to help us to understand something. Sam just did sort of an introductory discussion of it, but so Ginny talked about a letter that was signed, I believe, by 16 labor groups to the legislature, saying essentially what she just said. We can be for this if these are good quality union jobs. We're going to be against it if they are not going to be that. And a central component of that, not the only one, and I'll talk with Sam about the labor peace agreement in just a minute, was a project labor agreement. Now, not everybody in the labor movement knows what a project labor agreement is and how it works. Would you help us to understand why a project labor agreement was so important to the building trade's willingness to participate in supporting the Potomac Yards project?
Absolutely. So a project labor agreement is a pre-hire agreement that sets out the terms and conditions of a project. And by definition, it's an agreement between one or more labor organizations and an employer in the construction industry. So essentially, it lays out the wages, the benefits, the work schedule for a particular project, and it provides the ability for our unions to enforce the agreement. So we have project labor agreements all across the country. President Biden is a big fan of project labor agreements. Announced project labor agreements on all federal projects over a certain threshold. And really, what they do is they provide a sense of stability to the owner. They know exactly what they're getting. They have a reliable source of skilled, qualified labor, and it also provides a successful delivery of a project. And we get really excited about it because it also provides a lot of training and workforce development opportunities for local residents, and allows us to work with both, signatory union contractors and non-union contractors, to hire locally, to work with nonprofits and schools and career tech programs, to come into the construction trades. And I think the unique thing about project labor agreements in this region is they're really the only way to prevent against the wage theft and misclassification and exploitation of immigrant workers that is so pervasive in the construction industry. And we've seen on all different types of projects, from just a single family residential house to important government buildings and major economic development proposals, that without meaningful enforceable labor standards such as project labor agreements, there are going to be fly by night contractors that bring in exploited immigrant workers, pay them under the table, don't pay overtime, threaten their legal status. And so we really hammered home to elected officials and the public that, look, it's not just a matter of creating good jobs and providing good opportunities for local residents and all of the positive things that PLAs can provide, but it's really a matter of preventing disaster that is so common in on nearly every construction project in the the Washington metropolitan region.
All right, so let me just a quick follow-up question. Were there ever serious discussions about a project labor agreement for Potomac Yards?
We offered, right? We offered, but from the from the private entities that were associated with the the construction, we never got a serious proposal to do a project labor agreement. They had offered kind of meaningless labor standards that would have been completely unenforceable, and they were trying to kind of conflate those labor standards with our proposals to do an actual project labor agreement. But no, there was ultimately there. We tried, and we really tried, but ultimately no, there was no.
Yeah, apparently they thought they were dealing with a bunch of amateurs, and they got it wrong. So, Sam, I want to come back to you because you mentioned a phrase that, again, not everybody in our audience is going to know, and that's a labor peace agreement, which was the other thing that your letter, the 16 labor group letter to the legislature, said was a necessary precondition for the labor movement's support for Potomac Yards. Help our audience understand what a labor peace agreement is and does, and why it was so important to this deal.
Yes, and I always say to elected to stakeholders and elected officials that a labor peace agreement, because a lot of people have a little more sense of a project labor agreement. I always call it the cousin to the project labor agreement. And as Greg builds a hotel, or his guys build a hotel and finishes, and they have the project labor agreement there, workers in the private sector cannot do that. The only way that they can negotiate their wages and benefits is through a union. And so a labor peace agreement basically says, it says what it means, labor peace, that the owner, operator, developer of said hotel development will not intimidate or run an anti-union campaign against workers who want to join a union.
So and people would know, some of our audience would know that as a neutrality agreement, right? Yeah. The employer agrees to be neutral in the union organizing campaign.
Absolutely. And what we would give up as labor peace, because government has a proprietary interest in this Potomac Yard one, that we wouldn't strike. And so there's where the labor peace is. They won't intimidate workers and just allow them to decide yes or no if they want to join a union, and we won't go in and organize workers to strike. And we give up that. And then if all of that happens and workers decide yes, it then allows workers to get to their first contract within 6 months. If we don't get to the first contract in 6 months, it goes to an arbitrator, binding arbitration. And that's what a labor peace agreement is. And we sign those in this region with a lot of hotel developments here in the city. So it was nothing we were speaking to Potomac Yard that was any different than what we did at the Marriott Marquis in downtown DC, or the Conrad in downtown DC, or the Walter Reed site, or the St. Elizabeth site that are going to have hotel development. It's the same template, and we send it across the table. Yes, they can redline it, and we can negotiate that, and we just didn't have that happen in this process.
I can't resist commenting how sad it is that we have to strike a deal and reach an agreement for employers to not intimidate their workers to keep them from joining a union. That's where we are. That sums up very nicely where we are in America right now. But, now what's happening is workers are saying, you can't intimidate me. It's not going to work anymore because I'm seeing what's happening around the country. Okay, Virginia, this is the point I really wanted to get to. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask one more follow-up, Sam, quickly. Were there ever serious negotiations for a labor peace agreement? Same question I asked Greg. Was there ever a serious back and forth about a labor peace agreement? Were documents ever exchanged, for example?
We exchanged documents. We sent it over to them, but we never got a response back. And
that's not an exchange. Wait a minute, that's not an exchange. That's an email.
that document went to the developers, but then we got a lot of excuses and a lot of excuses like it will raise the labor cost. Somebody else, we just manage the property. There's other financial backing in there, sort of JP Morgan, other folks. This is why Greg and I partnership with the trades is great, because Greg even offered to find financing, right? We have pensions. Greg has a lot of pension funds. Like, we'll help you bake in this cost where this makes no sense at it. And that was a runaround. So it was a lot of excuses afterwards. And as they said, it was about the math. We were trying to solve the math problem, but they didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
You can stay up to date with the latest news about workers, worker power, and unions by subscribing to the Power at Work blog. You'll receive the weekly download, a Power at Work newsletter sent straight to your inbox. The weekly download collects about 24 of the week's articles, academic studies, press releases, podcasts, and videos from across the internet. We find the stories and deliver them directly to you. So subscribe to the weekly download right now on the front page of the Power at Work blog. Go to poweratwork.us.
Okay, so Virginia, now I want to get to you, and I want you to take us inside a little bit. So you and Greg and Sam find out there's not going to be a PLA, there's not going to be a labor peace agreement. So you're a hard no, right? All of you are a hard no now. How did you go about killing this deal? I mean, you're up against the governor. You're up against a billionaire who's got a lot of public identity in Washington. He's got a lot of public power in addition to his economic power. You've got the developers who are pretty wealthy and powerful and do a lot of work in this business. In fact, I think the developer had actually just developed the Amazon headquarters in Northern Virginia. I think it was the same developer. So now you've got to go about killing this thing. Tell us how you did it.
Well, so from the very, very beginning, we have a very strong relationship with the leadership and the members of the General Assembly, the House and the Senate. We are heavily engaged in politics, and we worked very hard to flip the House to make sure that the Democratic Party had control of the legislature. So from the very beginning, they knew, because we know each other, that our number one priority is to organize, to grow the labor movement, and to give people those rights. So as soon as this project came up, and we said to them, of course, what we're going to be looking for in deciding whether to support this is whether the hotel workers, whether the construction workers, whether the janitors, whether the retail workers, et cetera, whether everyone is going to have the right to have a union. And what we were told by the leadership of both the House and the Senate is, if they don't, we're not going to do it. And we were told from the very start, our elected officials said that we basically had a veto over this project. And they very much urged at every step the developers, primarily the developer, JBG Smith, constantly meeting with them, and everybody was saying to them, if you don't come to an agreement with labor, we will not have this project. So it wasn't just a sudden thing where we said no. It was a constant, every day, every week, lobbying campaign by the legislators to get the developer essentially to agree that this was not going to be an entire entertainment district of low-wage exploitative jobs, but it was going to actually offer an opportunity for lifting up the entire community. And so, we never gave up. We went through the first half of the session hoping that we were going to be able to get them to recognize that they're giving up a $2 billion project just to be able to screw over some hotel room attendants. This is it seemed like along the way, it just seemed inconceivable that exploiting workers was so precious, to this developer, that no one was going to be able to talk them into, collaborating with labor. So at some point, we just decided we're going to have to, pull the plug on this thing because, it was just dragging out. It was dragging out. And there were, lots of conversations taking place, and people at the city level, at the state level, both the House and the Senate, the city councilors, other people in the community, other stakeholders were all trying to see whether couldn't there be some accommodation so that we would be able to bring some benefit to working class people and low income people, minorities, in our area. And we finally realized that this wasn't going to happen. And so that's at that point, we just told the leadership of the House and the Senate, it's not working. We're going to have to oppose this. And we had a press conference. We were all there, all of the unions, all of labor. We said, we're sorry, we can't do this. And there simply is nothing in this for anybody except billionaires.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to ask you a question that's really unfair because you're not a mind reader. You're not a psychoanalyst. I know you can't.
I am a psychoanalyst. No, just
well, any really good labor leader has to be something of at least a psychotherapist, if not a psychoanalyst. So here's my question. I may not share values with the governor of Virginia or the owner of the Wizards and the Capitals or these real estate developers, but I'm willing to accept that these are intelligent people, right? You don't rise to the level that they're out. There are some exceptions to this, but generally you're not a successful business owner, as all of them are, without being reasonably intelligent and insightful. And certainly they're all paying large amounts of money to government relations people and public relations people who are telling them what you just told us, that if you don't do what the Alexandria City Council and the state legislature want, and that's going to depend on the labor movement, you're not going to get this deal. What happened? What is it that kept them? Was it from doing business with you on this? And I'm particularly curious, is it ideology that kept them from doing it? Are they just, I can accept that the governor is so anti-union that he just can't stand to be in a room with you all, right? I don't know if that's true, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear that was true. But the business people, Ted Leonsis does business with unions every single day of his adult life. All of his players are unionized. His arena is unionized. He does business with universities that have unionized personnel. This is the part of the story I cannot figure out. Help me to understand what is going on here, because I don't get it.
It's a great, great question. And I think that's what kind of led us to believe that at some point that they were going to give in and that we were going to, get good jobs out of this. I think two things come to mind. One is, and I think maybe particularly with the developer, because there's a long history in Virginia of unions being marginalized, of the working class being, relegated to the margins of total indifference. And so I think that there was a sense of they didn't really believe that the Democrats in the end would stick with labor. And they had some evidence to this. Remember when we had a trifecta in Virginia, the governor and
right.
the state both houses of the General Assembly, they did not repeal the right to work law. So there
Right,
was
that's
a
right.
little bit of an understanding and a history that maybe the Democrats were going to, try either successfully divide us or maybe get us to concede to, $15 minimum wage or some such thing. But I think that they misread. So they misread the fact that everything has changed in the country and in the state. Everything's changed, and now the majority of the people support labor. Everybody understands what's happened to workers, that their wages haven't grown for 40 years, that all of the money is being concentrated at the top. And so they misread that is one thing. And the second thing is, like, apparently you don't have to be that smart to be a billionaire, because that's the only thing I can figure. I mean, I think there was just a lot of, incompetence in this. I mean, one would question, why did Ted Leonsis not meet with the head of the finance committee of the Senate until the 2 days before the end of the session? I mean, why they're, yes, all of this could have been taken care of, and I think they could have factored in, and Sam says it really well. They just didn't get with our new math. Their math went one way, and Sam always says, but there's a new math now, which is that working people should not be exploited and taken advantage of. They should also benefit from economic growth. So this is a new day in Virginia, and I hope that, and thanks for helping us to publicize. I hope that people will now take heed of that and understand going forward that times have changed, and that labor must have a seat at the table. And that's the lesson of this whole escapade.
Absolutely, and let me just say, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is, I don't have any pretensions about what this blog is, but I wanted this to be available to local labor movements and state labor movements all across the country that are facing these kinds of economic development dilemmas and are trying to figure out, what do we do? What can we do? Can we win this thing? And I want them to see you as a model for not only that they can do it, but how they can do it. But I want
Public professionals, would you like to learn how data, digital innovation, and AI skills can improve your work and help you serve your constituents better? The answer is Innovate US. Innovate US offers no-cost learning on the skills you need to succeed in government in the 21st century. Attend a 1-hour weekly workshop or enroll in a course on AI or human-centered design at your own pace. It's all free to you. Visit innovate-us.org today to learn more and sign up. That's innovate-us. Visit right now.
But I want to close on this question, if you don't mind. So this was a victory. I would put it this way, and I don't mean to be in any way negative about this. Maybe I can't avoid being a little bit negative about this. This was a victory of a sort, right? But I wanted to ask you, and I'll start with you, Greg, if you don't mind. Which outcome would you have preferred? The outcome that you got, or a PLA and Potomac Yards being built and thousands of new building trades union members in Northern Virginia? Which outcome were you really hoping to get?
I think there was, that's a really important question, because I think there was a sense at some point that maybe our unions were being insincere when we, in the very beginning said we want to make something work. We very much did want to make something work. I mean, our top preference was let's do a deal, and if we get assurances and meaningful binding commitments that we will have good paying jobs and there won't be exploitation. I mean, our unions will support projects. We have a strong track record of doing that. So no, absolutely. I mean, we would have far preferred to be able to hang our hat on a really kind of a union district, right? Like a union entertainment district that could be the model for development in other parts of the region. And from our mind, that the victory is obviously the effect that all of these efforts have on the institutional memory of the developers, right? So part of the reason I think that maybe the developers said, we don't want to do this even if it costs us the project, is the precedent that it would set that if you want a handout from the state, you're going to have to work with labor. This is not a negotiation. And I think we would far prefer a precedent that these projects are successful. But sometimes you've got to show that, look, we're willing to walk away from really bad, potentially bad, harmful jobs, and hope very, very clearly that the next time an opportunity like this comes around, that the developer is going to be like, I don't know, 5% smarter, and decide to make reasonable commitments to workers.
Yeah, let me just say, if you believe Virginia, I'm not sure 5% is going to be enough. But Sam, let me ask you the same question. So, and I think probably for you, this is a little bit of a closer call because you have union members potentially on both sides of this, right? You have union members in the district who are working in the current arena and working around the current arena and working in hotels near the current arena. And then if you had gotten the LPA, you would have been able to organize and had union members at the hotels and at the actual facility at Potomac Yards itself, the arena. Which would have been the better outcome from your perspective? The one you got or the LPA?
I would say the one we got, because it strengthened both CLCs on both sides of the river, both in DC and Northern Virginia labor. Yes, as Greg said, I would agree with him most. We want to show that we can be reasonable and negotiate deals and grow. Virginia is a growth state for us in hospitality. And so, but in the end, we did not go for low wage poverty jobs across the board. And I think that strengthened both our stature as a labor movement, but also in the eyes of major stakeholders that make decisions, the policymakers, the elected officials, but also the developers in this region, right? I remember a comment from one of the real estates. It was like, yeah, if this goes down, we'll share that this was labor who killed it in our shareholders newsletter. And we're like, okay, that's actually great for us. We don't and Greg has answered because I was very intense at that moment. But Greg just sort of shrugged his shoulder, and I concur with him. We tell them that will let you know that. Yeah. Tell your developers as a shareholder, hey, maybe next time do the deal with these guys because it creates profit for me. So yeah, share with everybody. Tell the world. And so we really appreciate you helping us share this story as well too. And so, but I think it really has strengthened us. I'm looking forward to a great regional partnership with Jenny and the Northern Virginia labor movement here, that we can be supportive of each other on both sides of the Potomac.
Very exciting. So, Jenny, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question. I'm going to let you close on this because you all have been very, very generous with your time and told exactly the great story I'd hoped you would tell. So where do you go from here? How do you, so you had a success and you pointed out that maybe the Democrats in the legislature haven't always leaned as far forward as they needed to lean forward for the labor movement and for working people in the state. We now have an example of a state getting rid of a right-to-work law in Michigan. Is the next step here going back to the legislature when the Democrats get a trifecta, again, meaning the governorship and the General Assembly and the Senate, and saying, okay, this has to be in the top 10 items on your agenda? Or are there other things that you can build on from this experience?
Well, to answer that question, yes, when we have a trifecta, number one, top of the list is they do need to repeal the right to work law, because our number one priority and the number one need for our region and our nation as a whole is to allow workers to organize unions, and that stands in the way. So if we're going to reverse income inequality, if we're going to strengthen our democracy, then yes, they have to repeal the right to work law when we have a new governor in there. And I think that they've heard us say that, and I think that they will do that. And meanwhile, as time goes on and in all of our localities, with these development projects, we want to support the ones that will give workers the opportunity to have a voice on the job and a seat at the table. And we want to ask of all of our elected officials at the local and state level to stand with us and demand that developers and end users and all of these projects help lift people up out of poverty so they can afford to continue to live in our region and afford to have the dignity, of good wages and family supporting jobs.
Greg Akerman, Virginia Diamond, Sam Epps, a fantastic conversation, a great story, a playbook for how to beat a billionaire here on the Power at Work blog. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Seth. Appreciate you.
Well, how about that, huh? The power of solidarity, how to beat a billionaire. We've given you a roadmap, not we, but the terrific people who fought this fight, the folks that you just heard from, Virginia, Samuel, and Greg, and the many, many, many other trade unionists who supported them, making hard choices, fighting the good fight against some very powerful, very wealthy people, and winning. These kinds of fights are going on all over the country. Billionaire sports team owners would love to have the public subsidize their buildings. The question is, what does the public get in return? Do they get good quality union jobs? They should, and you should be fighting for it. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to present this. We wanted to give you some insights, some tools, some stories that you could use if this issue comes to your community. So thank you again for joining us. We're really excited to be able to present this kind of content to you on the Power at Work blog. You can find out more about it by subscribing. How about if you go ahead and subscribe? You can find a subscription form at the bottom of the front page on the blog. You can also connect with us on on social media. It's Power at Work all over the place. We have pages on LinkedIn and Facebook. Just search Power at Work blog. You can find us at Power at Work blog on Twitter, X, and Threads. You can find us at Power at Work on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all of the blogcasts on the blog, but you can also find them on the Burns Center for Social Change channel on YouTube. They're there as well. You can also find our podcast, as I said earlier. You can find our podcast on all the commercial podcast providers as well as on the blog. So our content is available. We share it widely. It's all free. It doesn't cost you a thing, at least not from us. We're delighted to have you participating. Hey, if you liked this conversation, leave a comment or at least click on the thumbs up, the like button at the bottom of the page. And let us know that you really appreciate the content you're hearing. But if you have questions, if you have issues, if you have disagreements, if you want to get into a fight, go ahead. That's what the comment section is for, right at the bottom of the page. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you back here on the blog very soon.
The Power at Work blog is a project of the Burns Center for Social Change at Northeastern University. The Burns Center develops innovative, participatory, and equitable approaches to solving public problems using new technology. Our faculty and fellows are accomplished, nationally recognized changemakers. Interested in learning more? Go to burns.northeastern.edu and sign up for our mailing list. And you can follow us on social media at Burns Center on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. The Burns Center for Social Change, from demanding change to making it.